mi gente, it's MsMalcolmHughes, and thank you all for joining me for another book review. So today we are going to review a book from my October reads, closing that out next year. My word for the year is consistency, so that we will not have the same lag. As you know, 2020 has been challenging for all of us, so next year my goal is consistency and more book reviews. But for today, we are going to review Of Captivity and Kings by E.Y. Laster. Of Captivity and Kings kind of has two storylines that are happening simultaneously that inevitably will become one storyline throughout the series. So this isn't intended to be a one-off book. You can tell that from the ending, but it's intended to be a book with multiple parts, or it's intended to be a story with multiple parts. So this book itself is one about slave trade in Africa. It's also about the internal struggles for power within the kingdom. So within the kingdom, you have the high king, the head king, and then you have multiple kings who each run their own area. You have the entire kingdom of Nudola, and then within that you have subsequent kingdoms. So it's an empire and alliance of Nudola. I think of it kind of as the United Arab Emirates, right? So you have each individual piece that's come together to create this united force, right? So that's what we have here. So within that we have the high king, right? We have the kingdom of Nabara, right? And within that you have the high king, you have the high queen, you have the daughters, you have the son, and the daughter Imani is essentially our main character. She's kind of the thread throughout. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about the flaw with that a little bit later. And then you have subsequent kingdoms. You have the Scorpion Kingdom, you have the Kybera Kingdom, you have the Sao Kingdom, you have the Essie Kingdom, you have the Soto Kingdom, and that encompasses all of the kingdoms. So now, the way in which everything intersects is, even though you have this internal battle, right now it's a front of unity within the kingdom, but always, you know, anyone who is in a position of power, there's someone who wants your spot, right? So even though we have the high kingdom of that family, which is King Amkar, Queen Samya, Prince Jelani, Princess Imani, there's other characters, but those are the main characters there. And then you have other folks, again, who want, you have other families, other kingdoms who want that spot, right? But the thing that is unifying all of these kingdoms currently is peace, right? You've had this long period of peace that's been brought about by King Amkar. He's a great king, but there is an external force that's threatening everything, and that's slave traders in Africa. So the big concern is that someone, they don't know who yet, is working with slave traders, because people are getting sold out, people are disappearing, right? It's just a known fact, and they're getting closer. So the slave traders are Roman. Currently, Rome has taken over and conquered a certain part of Africa, and they're pushing in closer to Nudola, right? They're pushing in, they're capturing, trying to capture more slaves in order to sell them off. So these are the two big challenges. One, internal strife, and then also external forces. Now, one thing I do want to make clear is this book isn't written modern day. It's actually written in the 4th century. But I think the author does a good job of ensuring that you don't feel as if it's antiquated or something that you cannot relate to. You have all of these different characters from all of these different kingdoms, and you get to follow their storylines. So in that, I can tell all of those parts, in all of those parts being put together, I can tell that the author really set out to write an epic novel. That is clear. You do not title a book Of Captivity and Kings, set it in the 4th century Africa, that is telling the story of slavery and internal strife, and not intend for it to be an epic journey and an epic novel. Let me say this. Setting out to write a novel, let alone an epic novel, is not an easy feat, right? It's hard, it's challenging, and kudos to the author for putting this effort forward. Did they succeed is the question. Did the author of this book succeed in writing an epic novel? Let's talk about it. So there are some things that I think the author does really well. I think the author has created dynamic characters that you become invested in, right? They each have their own voice. At no point in time was I reading a particular character's chapter and felt it as if I was hearing the voice of the author too strongly, or hearing remnants of another character. So in that was great. I do like that the characters are diverse. I like the aspect of multiple kingdoms. I actually think the writer is a good writer. I think that she's capable of telling a story and more or less keeping your attention throughout. And we'll talk about why I say more or less. I think the author has done a really good job of creating another world, right? I think that the ability to create a kingdom and to create all of these characters and have them interconnect and make sense is hard. So what I really like about this book, there are dynamic characters. I think the author has done a good job of writing to those characters. I think you become invested in those characters. I think that the author has done a great job of creating an alternate reality, its own world, right? You are transported into that world. You have an idea of the community there. In each different kingdom, you have an idea of their culture and what they're striving for, and more or less where the challenges come from for the internal beefs that they do have. I am struggling a little bit to do this review only because I cannot remember the last time I have battled myself about a book as much as I've battled myself about this book. There are aspects of this book that I love, the ones that I just mentioned, right? There are moments in this book where you are fully drawn in and you're like, that was really good. But those moments were not always consistent, right? So let's talk about some of the issues I had with this book. And I know that the author intends to write part 2 at the very least. I think it's going to be a 3-part series. So hopefully some of these recommendations will be improvements down the line. So first things first. One thing that frustrated me with this book early on, and it could be a me thing, but I think it's an important point to note. There are a number of characters in this book, a significant number of characters. So initially it was hard to keep up. I would spend the first half of a chapter trying to figure out who is this character, how do they relate to the storyline, what's going on, and all of that was because I could not find a character index. And I was like, this book desperately needs a character index. So I was extremely frustrated, right? At this point, I'm probably 40% through the book. And I was hanging with a friend, and a friend was flipping through the book, and they were like, here's character index. It's in the back. Okay, so I am not someone who opens the book, flips through the back. See, that's not how I tend to read books, usually. So once that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have a completely different experience with the book now. And unfortunately, that wasn't really the case. Even though I can more readily identify who each character was, how they fit into the story, a big piece that was challenging here is when you have this many characters, in order to make the story connect, it needs to be seamless. I need to know how everyone relates, right? And I don't think it's impossible to do. I don't. You can have this many characters. You can write this epic novel that you want to write, but there has to be interconnectivity that is stronger, right? And a good example of that would be A Brief History of 7 Killings. There are a million characters. There are so many characters, but it's still brilliantly done. And I think that's where this was trying to go, and I think that it can get there. And I think that's why I'm kind of really passionate in doing this review, is because I think this has the capacity to be an epic novel. I think it has the capacity to be everything the author intended for it to be. I just think that it needs a couple of tweaks. Outside of the character index and the connectivity issue, a sub part of the connectivity issue is that there are just too many loose strings, right? There are too many storylines. I don't know how they all connect. I can kind of figure it out, but I shouldn't have to do the guesswork. She's telling a lot of tales, and honestly, a lot of the tales could have been stories within stories. For example, the slave catchers in the book, some of them have their own chapters. It tells their story, their experience. I get why you would want to add that to the book. I get that you would want to have that additional perspective, have someone really be able to have all sides and have that objective view. You don't need it. It's not necessary here. In my opinion, it's not necessary here. That could very easily have been a story that two characters within another chapter told about that. Like, because there are rumors of the slave catchers, or you could, like, I heard a story that X, Y, and Z and this happened. And if you do want to keep them in, then I think it should be lessened. I don't think we need as much exposure to them as we get. There are characters that I absolutely love, and I think they need more attention. Amani needs more chapters. She needs more attention. She is our main character. I think one could argue that there is no main character, and I think that's a lie. Imani is the main character. Imani and everyone connected to Imani needs more attention. Because what I found myself experiencing while reading this book is, in certain chapters, when am I going to get back to Imani? When am I going to get back to the High Kingdom? When am I going to get back to those characters? So when am I going to get more of Amkar? When am I going to get more of Samia, right? When am I going to get more of Jailani? When am I going to get more of Mikaeli? And sorry if I'm pronouncing any of the characters' names wrong. There's also another family that I think could have gotten more attention, right? And that's Kimura and Ketamine and that family. And the reason for that is because they have their own internal strife, and Kimura hates his uncle because his father was king and his father was killed. And because his father was king and he was next in line, and it didn't pan out that way. So that internal struggle, and how does that tie into the larger battle for who's gonna be High King, right? That is a compelling storyline that I wanted to follow, right? We don't know how his actions are influencing everything else. We have other stories, right? We have a different kingdom. There's a backstory there with the Scorpion King, right? And how he may have done something very treacherous to Queen Samia, the High King's wife, right? There is a storyline with his sons, right? And how there may have been a Cain and Abel type situation, right? There is a storyline that one of the sons may actually be an inside trader and working with slave catchers, right? And I think that is useful, but we get that kind of at the tail end. I needed more. I needed more of that backstory. I wanted to know more of how we got here. Why is the contention so high? Why does the brother feel that way toward his other brother, right? We get a little bit of that, right? So I don't want to undermine the storytelling that the author has done. We do get some of that. I would have wanted more. It would have made the connections easier to follow, and I think we needed that. I think the reason I'm highlighting that so much is because this book ends in a way that is a cliffhanger, and I don't think it's the worst cliffhanger. For the multiple emotions I had reading this book, I think that I thought that I would hate the ending, and I did. So that was pleasant. I was actually really on edge about the ending of this book because I knew that would determine the way that I felt about the book in general, because I did have so many ups and downs, roller coaster type ride while reading this book, and really being torn between, I love this part, I don't like this so much, right? And how would I go about reviewing it, because I had such mixed emotions, because there are aspects of this book that I absolutely love. I love the strong characters, especially the strong women characters, right? Imani and Ketamine. These characters are golden. I love the generational knowledge. I love the magic here. But again, that's another storyline that needed more attention. I don't really know what's going on, right? There's some characters that seem to have storm-like capabilities, but that is probably an oversimplification. But I don't have enough contextual knowledge to really tell you what a character's powers are, right? I know that there was a foreshadowing, a premonition of a big battle and how someone would be able to use these powers, but it seems as if when the big battle happened, that didn't occur. I'm just left confounded and confused. at the end of this book, I think that the inevitable, or what's feared, has happened, right? There has been some treachery, right, in the very essence of the word. And people are getting hurt, and things are going awry. You're taking from a very high to like a low, like, oh my. And that part is really well written. I will give the author that. That part is superbly written. That roller coaster ride, I mean, that roller coaster ride, that should have been a roller coaster. The battle, it should have been a roller coaster. That was well done. You were with these characters, you were feeling their fear, you were feeling their adrenaline, you are trying to make it out, you are rooting for certain characters, and that's great storytelling. But it wasn't throughout. And even after that scene, we're introduced to new characters who might probably play a role in the second book in the series. But at the end of this book, you are left wondering, who are these characters? What is happening? How do they fit? Why do people keep mentioning Moreau? Why was that not mentioned earlier? Because even though you want to leave it on a cliffhanger, your reader should also leave feeling fulfilled and not confounded. So those are my frustrations with the book. Those are my highs, those are my lows. So if I had to rate this book, to give it a grade, and I have gone back and forth about this so many times, I would give this book a B-, maybe a C. C+, B-, for the reasons that I stated. I think that it has the capacity, the potential to be great. And I'm not just saying that. I think this storyline has the potential to be great. But I think that the author needs to scale back on the number of characters, highlight certain storylines that need more attention, and ensure that there is a thread that weaves the entire thing together. It cannot be piecemeal. It cannot be a brilliant moment and then I'm getting distracted, can't stay on the story, right? I really want it to be just great throughout, because I think it has the capacity. I think it has the potential. I think the author is a strong author. I think that the author will only grow. But I think that there are some changes that need to be made. So that's my review. Do I think that you all should read the book? I don't think that it would hurt. I think that it's worth checking out. And that's what I'll say. I don't think it would hurt to read the book. Again, I think the author has the potential to create a brilliant story. And I hope that they do. I would love to read it. I would love to read it and to see it become everything that it feels it has the potential to be. Because I can tell the author set out to write an epic novel and to take you on this journey, and I think it can get there. So I'm really excited to see what it becomes. Again, thank you all for watching. More book reviews to come. The next videos will be my review of the 1619 Project. That's my last book review from October. And then we get into January, the books I'll be reading in January. I'll also be doing a giveaway, which is super exciting, so stay tuned for that. I also have a special announcement about a book that's coming out that I'm super excited to read and review, which is also connected to my giveaway. Won't say what it is right now. I'll let you all ponder and speculate on that. But that's it for me, y'all. I am MsMalcolmHughes, someone who strongly believes that books are sometimes better than people. I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. Stay safe and be kind. Also, for those of you inquiring, I do still have buttons, my MsMalcolmHughes pins, and the details on how to get those are below.